tragic set of circumstances. I think many of us have had the experience of flying in and out of that airport. It's a busy airport. But the tragic loss of innocent life is I think, deeply sad. And at the same time, the National Transportation Safety Board's got an important investigation to do to give people the answers that they need. And in my experience, it's always best to let them do their work.
Have you had a chance to talk to your counterpart, U.S. Defense Secretary?
We have had the opportunity just to convey our condolences. He also lost service members today, yes. Military members as well. And I'm also taking the opportunity next week. I'll be down in Washington, and we're arranging for my first meeting with the new Secretary of Defense and with others in Washington. We've got a lot of work to do together.
Yes, you do, especially when it comes to that tariff talk, and we're going to get to that. But let's get to the big announcement that you made today. 668 residential housing units for Canadian Armed Forces members. Now, I got a quote from the Ottawa Citizen. They were saying that there were 1,197 individuals waiting for military housing. So how is Ottawa now continuing to address the housing needs of military members? Because it's one of the problems they're facing.
And let me assure all the military members, the announcement we made today is an important one, and it's in 9 different locations right across the country, including where I was today at Base Borden, with 120 new units there. But it's just a good start to it. And frankly, we actually need several thousand, not just because of what we need right now to satisfy the housing requirements of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but we need to grow the Canadian Armed Forces. We need to hire 14,500 additional people. We know that it can be very difficult to find affordable housing in or near their workplaces. And so we're making those investments. The announcement today, as I say, is an excellent start. We also cut the ribbon on a new training facility, a barracks, that has 330 units for people to go there to be trained. It's the first of what I hope will be several at Base Borden, several more, obviously many more, right across the country. We've got, I think there's been a significant underinvestment in the infrastructure and the foundations of the Canadian Armed Forces.
And it's affected recruitment.
Well, it does affect recruitment. It affects our ability to retain people. But we need more great Canadians to join the Canadian Armed Forces, and we have to support them. And that means make sure that they have adequate housing, childcare, health services, appropriate compensation and benefits. There are so many things that we need from them, and we have a responsibility to support them when they take on that important job on behalf of all Canadians.
It is an important job, and it needs to be a good one for them. Let's talk about the tariffs, the looming threat of tariffs from the Trump administration. We heard from the Commerce nominee calling for an end for the movement of fentanyl across the border. How are you responding to that? Even though we're hearing from people who say that it's about 1% of the fentanyl in the U.S. is coming through our borders.
In fact, it's slightly less than 1%. And you probably know that I actually spent a fair bit of my previous career.
Yes, 4 decades policing our city, Toronto.
Policing, but also in drug enforcement. And so we work really closely with the United States. Listen, the concern around the opioid crisis, the number of people that are dying on both sides of our border are deeply concerning to both countries. I think it is incumbent upon us to work together. We've always been very proud of that large undefended border, but it's also an effective border. But clearly they want us to do more, and we've said we'll do more. I think it's a legitimate and entirely necessary and appropriate response. Canada needs to do more to protect Canadians, but also to protect our friends and neighbors. But I think some perspective on proportionality of the nature of the threat, only a very small percentage of illegal immigrants and illegal drugs, fentanyl in particular, is actually sourced in Canada. Canada also faces some challenges at their borders, you know. Yeah. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and firearms cross that border all the time. I think it is incumbent upon both countries to do always everything that can be done to protect our citizens on both sides of that border, and at the same time, because our economies and our societies are so deeply integrated, it's important that that border be functional as well to support the important work that we do together.
When you see what they're doing, sending troops to the southern border, as Minister of Defense, would you ever think about something like that, putting troops on our border? Well,
not to deploy our troops to the border. I don't believe it's at all necessary. But one of the things that the RCMP and the CBSA that are doing really good work is to defend our border and our interests, and also work collaboratively with the United States. They've asked for some help because there's certain expertise, some equipment, with drones, surveillance capabilities, logistics that the Canadian Armed Forces can support the RCMP. It is very much a border and policing responsibility, but we're all hands on this one. And if the RCMP, when they ask for assistance, we're going to provide that assistance. That's not deploying our troops onto the border, but it's making sure that our capabilities are available to our law enforcement partners.
You recently accelerated the 2% NATO spending timeline to 2027. Trump recently told the World Economic Forum he wants it up to 5%. Are you going to commit to an accelerated timeline now, especially with what the U.S. president is asking?
I'm working really hard to get us to 2%, Dwight. And in fairness, the message that I did share last week is that it's achievable. We can get there. It still requires a decision of the Government of Canada to provide that funding, but that conversation has been moving forward quite significantly.
Have you been talking to the Trump administration about this?
We are talking, it's one of the reasons I'm also heading to Washington last week, but we've had a number of conversations with the new administration about what is achievable. And we believe that there's many opportunities for responsive. That partnership that exists between us, it's not just that we are all members of NATO and have committed to 2% of our GDP in spending on defense. It's the NORAD relationship, and in particular the work that Canada and the United States does together to defend our continent and our two countries. We do it in partnerships, and we've been doing it in partnership for 75 years. We know that we've got to make significant investments in NORAD modernization and in our armed forces. That's very much done in partnership, and I'm going to go down to Washington and talk to them about the work that we do together. The president, for example, just recently announced that he wants to build an Iron Dome of missile defense over the United States. That isn't limited to the 49th parallel. That work is done in partnership with Canada. We do it throughout North America. Canada has a great deal to contribute there. And I just want to make sure that we hold up our end in that relationship, but at the same time that we make sure that our American partners know and value Canada's contribution. We
might reach out to you after your meeting with Hegseth to get an update on how it went. Finally, looking towards the Liberal leadership race earlier this week, I read the letter you wrote. You threw your support behind Mark Carney. Why is he your pick to be our next Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, I'm very pleased that many of my colleagues and Liberals have put their name forward and offered themselves for leadership. I think we need that choice. But I've had the opportunity to speak to them all. I know everybody involved quite well. I did have a conversation with Mr. Carney. I believe that we also have to listen to Canadians, not just to each other. And in listening to Canadians, it's been very clear in my conversation with my constituents and with Canadians right across the country. They share our values, but they want to see some change in how we approach government and how we serve and support them. I believe that Mr. Carney represents that change that Canadians are seeking, and that's why I'm supporting him.
It's kind of strange calling you minister and not chief, but Minister Blair, thank you for your time.
Still answer to chief anytime anybody says it. But thanks, Dwight.
Thank you for being here.